Yo, what is up guys? So we're here to check out the new archetype, the Jack Knights, and talk about if the deck's going to be good or if this is just going to be another one of those decks where nobody plays. But let's go ahead and talk about it. I'll show you guys a play of the deck in action without just going for that turn 1 instant win, which the deck can do. It has a really insane field spell, and if you can activate it turn 1, you basically win. It's supposed to destroy decks that need the extra deck, but if you activate it turn 1, your opponent starts out with 1 card, so at that point, you've probably won the game, let's be honest here. But the archetype seems like it's actually pretty decent because it's got what makes a deck good, specifically being able to have a boss monster, which is this guy, the Link monster, that's immune to essentially most things in the game, minus being destroyed by battle. And then on top of that, you've got a lot of cards that search out other cards, it can banish cards, to add extra cards. You got the destruction of spells, you got the destruction of traps, and then also the ability to kind of survive on board. However, the one fault with this deck, it's a column-based deck, which means your opponent can run cards like Blasting Fuse and things that counter the whole column mechanic in the game. Now, briefly, I'll go over like in-depth effects after, but I just kind of want to go over like the basis of the deck. So what the deck does is if basically your opponent has cards in the same column, you special summon that card. Most of the cards have the effect where if there's 2 or more cards in a column, you get to just special summon the monster into the same column. And then after that, the monsters have some mediocre effects. I mean, overall, the boss monster is the key guy over here, but the monsters have either the effect of, you know, destroying a monster, getting rid of a spell and trap, add, search, banish to reposition your monsters, which is actually important for the boss monster of the deck, the Jack Knight of the World Remains. Now this guy, you actually don't want cards linked to it, and that's one thing that the purple Jack Knight can do. You guys are seeing the like broken turn 1 effect over here. Scars caused by the World Legacy. Like I said, if you activate this turn 1, you automatically just win the game, pretty much. I've seen builds that rush this. It can be inconsistent, but if you pull it off, you win. So what this card does, guys, is it gets rid of your opponent's entire extra deck. You have to have 6 Jack Knight monsters on the field or in the graveyard. Yeah, you get to get rid of your opponent's entire extra deck and all cards in their hand. And pretty much most decks at that point just say GG, they leave, whatever. Yeah, it's a pretty self-explanatory effect, but it actually has some bonus effects, so it's not just that. It's actually draw power, plus it's actually bonus stats on the monsters. And I'll go over everything in a second, but the cards basically are color-coded, so we have like red, purple, yellow, green, blue. But I kind of want to go over their effects and kind of go a little bit more in depth. The card IDs have changed, so I just want to say as a heads up, at the moment of me making this video, that is, you'll see a lot of these cards will say Tindangle. Let me go ahead and actually show you what I'm talking about. So you guys will see it says Tindangle Intruder, and it says that there's a flip effect. Don't look at that effect. What we're going to be looking at is the actual pictures effect, because this is the correct effect. So like I said, the whole deck is a column-based archetype, which it's good and bad. It's more so bad, I would say, if your opponent knows what the heck you're playing. Obviously, if they don't know what they're playing up against, they can, you know, activate a monster's effect and then maybe set a back row in the same column, which gives you an advantage. So, real briefly, all the monsters, for the most part, except for, of course, like the Link ones and maybe some obscure ones that come out later down the line, is if 2 or more cards in the same column, you just special summon it. Most of the cards, as of right now, have that effect where you can only activate the effect of like that specific color once per turn. So anyways, they're all big beaters with the exception of the orange guy, the Flickering Flame. This is the only card that has like low stats, but it's got pretty big defense points. But for the most part, they're all like 2,000-ish beaters, and when you have the field spell, they're going to be boosted up, so they're actually just big beat sticks, essentially. But they have like small little advantages that they can gain here and there. I'm not talking about just the boss monster that I'd say is ideal to make in the deck, because when it's not linked to anything, it's immune to being destroyed and also targeted, and it's 3,300, so it can be a task to get over for some decks. But anyways, the cards, I'm just going to color code them, so I'm just gonna call it like Red Jack Knight because the name actually might be changed. Although Crimson Lotus sounds pretty cool. But anyways, I'm just gonna call it like the Red Jack Knight and the purple one, just so it's easier for the video rather than saying the rest of the name. And I'm also not gonna be going over the effect where if there's 2 more cards in the same column, you could special summon it, because pretty much they all have that, and their effects can only be used once per turn for the most part. Again, I'll let you guys know if it's like conditional to that card, but I'm not gonna go over that specific effect on every single card. But I want to go over like what the archetype has to offer. So anyways, the red guy over here lets you actually banish a Jack Knight monster and then target a face-up monster and destroy it. So they have destruction of monsters. The purple guy over here lets you banish one until the next standby phase, which is usually what you want to do, guys, is actually utilize banishing the link monster. So when it comes back, you put it in a zone so it's not linked to a monster, therefore it gains the effect. Because if this card is linked, it does not gain those effects. Usually what you want is your link monsters to be all linked up, but this guy's a little bit different. You actually do not want them linked up, which that's kind of cool. I like that idea. It's different. But anyways, yeah, like I said, as long as well, actually has another effect. While there are no cards in the same column as this card, it can attack directly. So there's a little bit of play with that because the rest of the cards you want them in the same column for some bonus effect. But anyways, it can't be destroyed by battle or by card effects as long as it does not point to a monster. So basically, you put it in any of the main monster zones, and you should be good because all the arrows point downwards. So that's what you want to do with the boss monster of the deck. You want to summon it and then use the purple guy and place him anywhere else because you're going to be banishing it to the next standby phase. And then in addition to that, we have the green guy over here. So the green Jack Knight has the ability to, when it declares an attack, you get to add a Jack Knight monster from your graveyard and add it to your hand. The yellow guy over here lets you pop spell and traps. You banish a Jack Knight monster to do that. This one, it declares attack. This one you have to banish. Like, they all have, like, kind of these things where you gotta do something. Although banishing is much easier than declaring an attack. Although this guy would be much better because if you just got its effect when it's summoned, you could do a lot more with it. Oh, by the way, I should go over the conditions of Jack Knight of the World Remains. It actually just requires you to have 2 plush Jack Knight monsters, which is going to be 3 on its original first summon. But anyways, next up we have the orange guy over here, the Flickering Flame. And this guy over here has the effect where if this card is destroyed by battle or leaves the field, you can just special summon a Jack Knight monster from your hand. And then the blue guy over here makes it so when this card is normal or special from the hand, you can add Jack Knight cards with different names from your deck to your hand, except for itself equal to the number of your opponent's cards in the same column as his card. So basically, you get to have 2 cards potentially if your opponent has 2 cards there. So yeah, it's definitely nice to be able to play with that. However, the cards are high levels, so you guys will see the Dragonoid Generator here, which just generates tokens so you can actually tribute summon something, because if your opponent is, you know, at that spot where they're not playing something in like the same columns, I guess that gives you just extra cards, and just being a continuous card is nice because it gives you that extra column to actually be filled up. But yeah, that's basically what the archetype does as far as like the monsters go. I think, yeah, we went over like most of the monsters. So like I said, the red guy, he pops monsters. The yellow guy lets you get rid of spell and traps. The green guy lets you search after you attack, and the purple guy lets you banish, and the orange guy lets you special summon a Jack Knight monster from your hand, and then the blue guy lets you add. So basically the deck has, again, it has destruction of spells and traps, it has destruction of monsters, and it has a lot of searchability, and there's essentially an instant win condition. Let's be honest here. This card, you activate it again turn 1, you won the duel. Now, it's not that difficult to get out this many amount of monsters in the deck if the duel can prolong. However, so many decks these days are just so fast, I feel like this deck just might not have a chance, but the boss monster is pretty good. Again, if you can pull it off, it's pretty good. But the one thing that I have a problem with this deck as far as it, like, is it going to be competitive, is it any good, is that your opponent has to have, like, the cards in the same column. And usually that means if they have back row in the same column, usually back row these days is like solemn. It's to negate whatever you're bringing out, which then makes your deck fall apart. And then on top of that, the monsters are higher levels, so if your opponent doesn't have those cards, and maybe you don't have the continuous, you know, back row to support what you want to go for, then the deck kind of runs into a lot of problems. I mean, we might see some lower level ones. I mean, at the moment, I think level 5 is the lowest one, which is the blue guy over here. But who knows, we might get some more later down the line. But anyways, I definitely did make a video talking about like all the cards in Archetype when the deck got revealed. But anyways, if you guys haven't seen that video, I'm going to link it down below to go over all of them, but I just kind of want to talk about the Archetype and, you know, if the deck is actually good. They actually have another continuous trap card that I think is pretty decent. So anyways, this is the Whispers of the World Legacy. So when this card is activated, you get to target one level 6 or higher monster on the field. It gains 1,000 attack and defense until the end of this turn. And then when an opponent's spell or card is opponent's spell card or effect is activated in the same column as a Jack Knight monster you control resolves, negate that effect. Now, there's one problem that I have with this card. Negating the effect, that's great, but it does not destroy the card, so it's still there. However, the Archetype does have a lot of big beaters, and then when you combine it with this, which I don't see why you wouldn't play, because this is draw power, plus it boosts them all by 300, 300. It lets you discard a Jack Knight monster or World Legacy, which is the spell and trap cards of the deck. What you're able to do is just target one. Oh, I'm sorry, wait. It's you discard a Jack Knight monster or World Legacy, and you just draw a card. So that's pretty good. It's pretty self-explanatory. I don't see why they wouldn't play this card in the first place. It is like a gimmick win condition, but it's a card that you would normally play in the deck anyways. And again, if the deck prolongs enough and it's early in the game, that's a pretty good effect. I think this, a lot of people will be cheesing it. Like I said, with Grass is Greener, it could be a really nasty thing to run into. However, in the TCG, we're not really playing that, but I've seen some people try some things. I mean, you guys know people are really innovative. This card has potential to be pretty broken in the game. Again, if you're activating at turn 1. Most people just say GG and leave. So that's basically the gist of the deck. I want to know your guys' thoughts on the deck. Do you guys think the deck is actually good, or is this deck just bad? I think it has a little bit of potential, but I see it having so many problems. I mean, they are big beaters. They require the column mechanic, and they have a lot of tools that can make them pretty good. They've got a boss monster that's pretty good, decently, you know, to get out. It's not the most difficult, but it's not like you're going to be throwing out this card turn 1 majority of the time, because you have this column mechanic. I mean, I guess if you just special summon a bunch of cards from your hand, pendulums, but this card, it is still pretty good. But if you're investing all your cards into this one Jack Knight, right, and then your opponent goes Utopia attack over it, there's very little follow-up play with the deck, and that's how I feel if you're making it turbo. But the card could be good, and at that point, that's 4. You just need to get 6 in, and once you get 6 in, that's rip your opponent's hand. And obviously, if you're playing this, they'll kind of try to play around it by just utilizing all their cards. But they got a few good cards. But anyways, thanks Rottweiler for sending this in. Let me know your guys' thoughts down below on the Jack Knight Archetype. I would love to get your guys' feedback on this, but we'll see what else the Archetype gets. But I think it's an okay Archetype. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, drop a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button to see more new Yu-Gi-Oh! Archetypes in action.